In Verona, a city in Italy, two prominent families, the Montagues and the Capulets, are locked in a fierce feud that has lasted for generations. The reason for their hatred is long forgotten, but the rivalry remains. The family's servants, too, are caught up in the conflict, fighting in the streets whenever they meet. Verona's citizens have grown weary of the violence and the disruption it causes in their lives. To maintain peace, Prince Aeschylus, ruler of Verona, declares that any further fights will be punished by death. He hopes this will finally put an end to the senseless battles between the two houses. Romeo, the young son of the Montague family, is uninterested in the ongoing feud. He is sensitive and thoughtful, unlike many of his relatives who seem drawn to the family rivalry. However, Romeo is heartbroken over Rosalind, a woman he loves deeply but who does not return his feelings. He wanders the streets, distracted and full of sorrow, unable to focus on anything else. Romeo's cousin, Benvolio, who wants to help him find happiness, suggests that Romeo try to forget Rosalind by meeting other women. But Romeo believes he will never love anyone the way he loves Rosalind. Meanwhile, the Capulet family is making plans for their daughter, Juliet, who is nearing her 14th birthday. Lord and Lady Capulet are eager to see Juliet married to Paris, a nobleman with wealth and status. Paris has already expressed interest in Juliet, and her parents are delighted, convinced he will make a suitable husband. Although Juliet respects her parents, she is hesitant about marriage. She has never experienced love and feels uncertain about committing her life to someone she barely knows. However, she agrees to meet Paris at a grand masquerade ball her family is hosting. That same evening, Romeo's cousin Benvolio learns about the Capulet ball. Hoping to lift Romeo's spirits, he persuades him to attend. Romeo is reluctant at first, especially since the ball is being held by his family's enemies. But he agrees to go when he hears that Rosalind will be there, and his lively friend Mercutio, who is always seeking adventure, promises to make the evening enjoyable. The three friends disguise themselves in masks and make their way to the Capulet mansion, excited but with a sense of caution. As soon as they enter the crowded ballroom, Romeo is struck by Juliet's beauty. Her graceful presence and gentle demeanor captivate him instantly, making him forget Rosalind completely. In a daring move, Romeo approaches Juliet and speaks to her, comparing her beauty to a holy shrine. They share a conversation filled with tender, flirtatious words, and Romeo feels a connection with Juliet that he has never felt before. They share a kiss, and both are left with a feeling of deep affection, even though they have only just met. The moment, however, is cut short when Juliet's nurse comes to find her. Romeo's heart sinks when he learns that Juliet is a Capulet, his family's sworn enemy. Juliet, too, is devastated when she discovers that Romeo is a Montague. But their newfound love is stronger than the hatred between their families. They cannot bear to part and are left longing for each other, confused and amazed by the powerful feelings they share. That night, Romeo cannot stay away from Juliet and sneaks into the Capulet orchard to see her again. By chance, he hears Juliet on her balcony, speaking to herself and expressing her love for him despite the dangers their love brings. She wishes aloud that he could give up his family name so they could be together. Moved by her words, Romeo reveals himself, and they confess their love to each other. In that quiet moment, they decide to marry, defying the feud between their families. Early the next morning, Romeo goes to Friar Laurence, a kind and wise priest he trusts. Although the friar is surprised by Romeo's sudden love for Juliet, he agrees to marry them in secret, hoping that their union might finally bring peace to the two feuding families. Friar Laurence warns Romeo to proceed carefully, as passionate love can lead to dangerous consequences. Despite the friar's caution, Romeo is eager and filled with joy at the thought of marrying Juliet. Later that day, Juliet arrives at the friar's cell, where she and Romeo are quietly wed. Their private ceremony is full of joy, and for a moment, they feel as if nothing else in the world matters. They believe that their love will conquer all obstacles and that they will find a way to live happily together, despite the hatred that surrounds them. After the wedding, they reluctantly part, each filled with hope and excitement for the future. However, their happiness is short-lived. Soon after the wedding, Romeo encounters Tybalt, Juliet's hot-tempered cousin. Tybalt is furious that Romeo attended the Capulet ball uninvited and sees it as a grave insult to his family. He challenges Romeo to a duel, but Romeo, now secretly related to Tybalt by marriage, refuses to fight him, hoping to keep the peace. Mercutio, who is unaware of Romeo's marriage to Juliet, is outraged by Romeo's refusal and steps in to fight Tybalt himself. In a heated duel, Tybalt fatally wounds Mercutio. As Mercutio dies, he curses both the Montague and Capulet families, blaming their hatred for his death. His dying words cut deeply into Romeo's heart, filling him with guilt and sorrow. Overcome by grief and anger, Romeo abandons his peaceful intentions and fights Tybalt, killing him in a moment of blind rage. The people of Verona are shocked by the violence, and Romeo realizes too late the gravity of his actions. When the prince arrives to restore order, he is furious to see the bloodshed that has taken place despite his warnings. The Capulet family demands justice, calling for Romeo's death. However, the prince decides to show mercy by banishing Romeo from Verona instead. If Romeo is ever seen in the city again, he will be executed. Romeo is devastated by the sentence, knowing it means he will have to leave Juliet and possibly never see her again. Heartbroken, Romeo hides in Friar Laurence's cell, where the friar tries to comfort him. The friar reassures Romeo that banishment, though painful, is better than death. But Romeo, overwhelmed by the thought of leaving Juliet, feels as if his life is over. That night, he sneaks into Juliet's room to spend one final night with her. Together, they share a bittersweet farewell, expressing their love with sorrow and passion, knowing that dawn will separate them. At dawn, Romeo reluctantly leaves for Mantua, a nearby city where he will hide. Juliet is left behind, filled with despair and longing. She clings to the hope that they will one day be reunited, but her heart is heavy with worry. Her fears only deepen when her father, unaware of her secret marriage, insists that she marry Paris in just a few days. Juliet is horrified at the thought of marrying someone other than Romeo and desperately tries to refuse, but her father is adamant. Feeling trapped and hopeless, Juliet seeks the help of Friar Laurence, who devises a risky plan to save her from marrying Paris. He gives Juliet a potion that will make her appear dead for 42 hours. Once her family believes she has died, they will place her in the Capulet tomb. Romeo, informed of the plan, will come to the tomb to rescue her when she awakens, and together, they will flee Verona. Though terrified, Juliet agrees, determined to be with Romeo at any cost. That night, Juliet takes the potion, and the next morning, her family discovers her seemingly lifeless body. The household is overcome with grief, believing they have lost Juliet forever. They hold a somber funeral and lay her in the Capulet tomb, where she is surrounded by flowers and mourners. However, the message explaining the plan never reaches Romeo due to an unexpected delay, and instead, he hears only that Juliet has died. Shattered by the news, Romeo feels his world collapse. Believing Juliet is truly gone, he buys a vial of poison and returns to Verona, determined to die beside her. When he arrives at the tomb, he finds Paris there, mourning Juliet. Paris, thinking Romeo has come to desecrate the tomb, confronts him, and in the ensuing struggle, Romeo kills Paris. Grief-stricken and exhausted, Romeo enters the tomb and gazes upon Juliet's lifeless form, marveling at her beauty even in death. Speaking tenderly to Juliet, Romeo says his final goodbyes, lamenting the tragic fate that has separated them. He drinks the poison, choosing to join her in death rather than live without her. Moments after he dies, Juliet awakens, finding Romeo's lifeless body beside her. Realizing what has happened, she tries to take the remaining poison from his lips, but it is not enough to kill her. In her despair, Juliet grabs Romeo's dagger and ends her life, falling beside him. When the families discover the tragic scene, they are devastated, finally understanding the destructive consequences of their feud. Overcome with guilt and sorrow, both families agree to put aside their hatred, recognizing that their children's deaths are a direct result of their own stubbornness and pride. Through the deaths of Romeo and Juliet, Verona finds a fragile peace, and the long-standing feud is finally laid to rest. Though the lovers' lives were brief and filled with suffering, their love leaves a lasting legacy. The tragedy serves as a solemn reminder to the people of Verona about the destructive power of hatred and the enduring power of love. The tragic news of Romeo and Juliet's death spreads quickly throughout Verona. Their families are left to confront the bitter truth of their relentless feud. Lord and Lady Capulet, devastated by the loss of their only daughter, experience a profound regret and sorrow they cannot escape. The Montagues, too, are shattered by the loss of Romeo, realizing that their own enmity contributed to the untimely deaths of their beloved children. Both families begin to question the worth of the feud that has caused so much grief and despair. At the tomb, Prince Aeschylus, speaking on behalf of the grieving city, condemns the senseless feud between the two families. He recounts how the long-standing hatred between the Capulets and Montagues has led to the tragic deaths of innocent young lovers and several others caught in the crossfire. The prince himself, having lost kinsmen like Mercutio to the conflict, orders both families to set aside their grudges for the greater peace of Verona. Humbled and stricken with guilt, both families pledge to honor Romeo and Juliet's love by building statues of them, as a reminder of the heavy price of enmity. United in grief and sorrow, the Capulets and Montagues end their feud at last. The people of Verona mourn alongside the families, moved by the story of the young lovers whose devotion transcended family loyalty and social expectations. Romeo and Juliet's tale becomes a symbol of the power and fragility of love, as well as a warning about the destructive force of hatred. In their tragic legacy, the city finds hope for lasting peace, a testament to the love that endured even beyond the grave. The citizens of Verona, along with the Capulets and Montagues, vow to uphold this fragile harmony, carrying forward the memory of Romeo and Juliet as a lasting reminder of reconciliation and compassion.